to be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
The Hockey Time Machine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. There's not a Mount Rushmore for Canadian sports broadcasters, mostly because Mount Rushmore is in South Dakota. But if there was one, Dave Hodge would be on it. 16 years as host of Hockey Night in Canada, longer than that with the TSN All Sports Networks, and many other prominent assignments in a career spanning half a century. The province wrote he has a great sense of the big picture. The Toronto Star said Hodge commanded respect. And longtime Hockey Night executive producer Ralph Mellanby, who hired Dave at the age of 26, called him a perfectionist and the brightest announcer who ever worked for me. That's why it's an honor to be joined by Dave Hodge. Dave, thank you so much for making time for us.
Well, I'm not sure I can follow that with any proof, but that's up to you and the audience. And I'm happy to be here. Those of us who ask questions for a living, which I did for all of those years, seldom get a chance to answer questions. So it's interesting to be on this end of it, and I'm sure the questions will test me and please me with the subjects that you've chosen, largely surrounding me and my career, I guess. So
yes,
I have to be able to talk about that. Sure.
Well, we're going to provide the proof in the next hour of the praise that was heaped upon you. But since we puffed you up, let me bring you back down a little bit with one more quote from Mellanby before he hired you. Quote, "I think the worst audition we got was from Hodge. So why do you think he invited you back for a second one?"
It's only my version of what happened, but this begins with a phone call, not from Ralph, but from another Hockey Night producer named Bob Gordon, who asked if I would like to do an audition for Hockey Night in Canada. I wasn't sure of what the role was. I certainly didn't think it was host. But further explanation told me that that was what I was auditioning for, or would be. And I was 26 years old, as you say, with little or no television experience. And quite frankly, I thought they were crazy, and said that and told them to move on to the next person on the list. And Bob Gordon told me to sleep on it, and he would call me again the next day. Well, I slept on it, and I told myself that the next day wasn't going to include anything that was going to make me busy. It would take me an hour, 2 hours, whatever. Why not? I'm going to meet some people. It'll be an experience. I'll have a laugh, if nothing else. And I tried my best to prepare, as the perfectionist would do. And I over-prepared, and it was like I was trying to speak from memory with every line that I used. And as soon as it was over, I knew how bad it was, and I walked out of the studio, and on the street, actually, and heard the voice of Frank Selke Jr., who said, "Come on back." And I said, "What in the world for?" And he said, "You can do better." And I said, "I can agree with that." He said, "I would like you to try to do better." So all the pressure was off. I went in and just I winged it. All of that preparation meant nothing because it wasn't doing me any good the first time. And I did feel a lot better about it. But still, thank you, Frank, very much. He said, good, we'll be in touch. I said, yeah, sure. I'm sure you will. And there's no hurry. And they phoned and said, we'd like to hire you. And again, I said, why? It didn't make any sense to me. Well, I think the sense that it made to them was they were looking for somebody as young as I was who wouldn't be able to tell them, well, at my last TV job, I did it this way, so don't tell me to do it that way. Everything I learned from the start, I learned from them, and I think they liked that. And I think they liked the youthful look. Ward Cornell was there for a long time,
Mhm.
and I now know what what it means when too old is too old. And I had long hair, Beatlesque hair, if you will, at the time. And I said, I'm the host of Hockey Night in Canada. I assume you would like me to cut my hair. And they said, in fact, we'd like you to grow it. And that told me that they were looking for the look that I could give at the age of 26. So yes, the first audition was horrible. The second must have been quite a bit better.
Well, I got to say one thing. I hope you got a better agent for Dave Hodge than you were an agent for Dave Hodge, asking, why do you want to hire me?
But you put yourself in my position. I mean, it just, I was thinking Hockey Night in Canada, 60 minutes,
Yeah.
the biggest things on,
Right.
on television at the time. And surely experience had something to do with who would be hired for not just any position, but the national host of Hockey Night in Canada. So I almost didn't have time to be flattered. I had to try to convince myself that it was real. And then I had to try as hard as I could to be as good as possible to at some point I said, well, if I'm come this far, I'd like to get the job. But I still never thought I would.
Well, you'd already spent a year as the play-by-play voice for the expansion Buffalo Sabres when you were 25 years old. Now, at 25, Dave, I couldn't find my ass with both hands. I thought I could at the time, but looking back, I know better. How about you?
Well, at 25, I said the Buffalo position was a part-time one. We did 15 televised road games in the Sabres' first season. There will be anybody and everybody in Buffalo now who will be hearing this for the first time. I know two people in Buffalo who remember the fact that I was where I was in that season, watching Gilbert Perreault's rookie season in the NHL, which was really the biggest pleasure that came from following an expansion team. But I told them I have no television experience, and I'll do your play-by-play, but I want no on-camera appearances whatsoever included in this program. So no camera in the booth. I'm not going to any studio. They said, "Don't worry, we won't have a studio. It's not that big a deal." And so on that basis, I had done play-by-play in Chatham, Ontario, junior B hockey for the years I was there. So I was comfortable with play-by-play. They wanted an audition, an air check, which I didn't have. So I went into the studio at TSN and just put some crowd noise behind me and mocked up a hockey broadcast, and sent that off. If that's good enough, fine. If it's not, I can't do better. And it was an interesting experience. I worked with a color commentator named Rick Azar, and Rick was the sports director of the ABC station in Buffalo, and met with him, and he said, let's get a couple of things straight. You're the hockey guy, I'm the Buffalo guy. You probably know very little about Buffalo, but you probably know more about Buffalo than I know about hockey. So you're on your own for all of the hockey terminology and play-by-play and player ID, and I'll throw in some Buffalo color and try to sell some tickets for. He was a wonderful guy, and he at the end, I'm sure knew more hockey than he did at the beginning. But I'll go back to Gilbert Perreault.
Yeah.
I'd watched him play his junior hockey in Montreal with the junior Canadians, and it was a terrific team. Oul and Tardif and Perreault was at the top of that list, and he made moves in junior hockey that would astound me. In the NHL in Buffalo, it was fun. I guess that's the word, to watch him try those moves in the NHL. Without much help on left wing, right wing, or anywhere else on the ice from the Sabres. And he'd get frustrated, and but the odd time that they worked, it was even more remarkable to see him dazzle NHL opponents the way he did junior players. And I've sort of used Gilbert Perreault to track my own career, because I did see him play his first game. I did see him play his last game, and that was right about the time that I was at the end of my time at Maple Leaf Gardens. And during that time, every player who was in the NHL in 1970-71 had left the NHL, had retired. So I outlasted a generation of players, not for very long after that in that job. But yeah, and Harold Ballard too. In fact, we'll probably get to him. But
Yeah, could be.
Harold took over the Leafs just about the same time as I joined Hockey Night, and I incurred the wrath of Ballard and everybody else at the Gardens just not too long before Harold died. So everything that occurred under Ballard, shall we say, occurred on my watch, if I can put it that way.
Well,
And
we should point out, Dave, that Azar wasn't the only one around you during your year with the Sabres who had a somewhat limited hockey background. According to the Buffalo News in Philadelphia, this is a quote: "Every once in a while, we were treated to a candid shot of the blue line while a torrid goal-mouth scramble was taking place. And for a game in Pittsburgh, two of the three camera operators weren't familiar with hockey."
well, you need a play-by-play guy at those times, and if that was radio, then I was quite prepared for that. That goal-mouth scramble, while they showed the blue line, I was describing the goal-mouth scramble. I sure hope.
Now, your budding career almost got derailed before it really got going. I understand that you stepped in the batter's box to hit against the legendary softball barnstormers, the King and his court, and that the King, Eddie Feigner, pitching blindfolded, almost killed you.
I took however fast the fastball is right there. For whatever reason, nothing broke. I didn't lose a tooth. I had the blackest eye anybody's ever had, and then purple, then yellow. I went to hospital. They checked me out. I was determined to go back because there was a post-game party, and I didn't think I needed to miss it unless they told me I had a concussion or any broken bones. And no, you're free to go. So back I went, uh, opened a beer, and my first conversation was with the King, Eddie Feiner. And I said, oh, he looked at me and a little surprised to see me there. And I said, how often does that happen? And he said, happens all the time.
I hardly find that reassuring.
I said, I thought I might be somewhat unique. First of all, to be hit like that, and secondly, to survive and bounce back as fast as this. What do you mean this happens all the time? He said, you really wanted to get a hit off me, didn't you? And I said, I sure did. He said, you dug in. Yeah. He said, you weren't bailing out, were you, under any circumstances? No, that's why you got hit. And he said, I'm sorry, I can take no responsibility because I was blindfolded.
Yeah. He was pitching from second base too.
Yeah. Oh no, it was. I mean, the crowd was more very concerned. I mean, I was down for a while, and quickly whisked off to the hospital. But it's amazing. A lot of people who were there and are still around like to mention that before anything else, to say it was at the Canadian National Exhibition grounds. Thousands of people. I mean, it wasn't, it was a charity event that drew a lot of crowds, as the King and his court did, and what the radio station CFRB brought to it. I'm not sure. We had a few so-called celebrities, and I guess I would have been one of them, but not all of them finished the game. I was carried off.
Boy.
But I now I can laugh, but my face was numb, without feeling. I couldn't have a bowl of soup for probably 6 months. And I went to a doctor and said, am I going to be like this for the rest of my life? And he said, we don't know. I said, is there any way, no way to find out? He said, we can slice you open and have a look, but that's only going to produce a yes or no answer. Yes, you're going to be like this forever, or no, you might regenerate and be okay. What do you want the scar for? You're just going to have to wait and get that answer the same way without the surgery. I said, you got it. And as I say, 6 months later, fairly slowly, it came back to normal.
Thank goodness. Well, you described yourself, quote, as a total stranger when you joined Hockey Night. What did you want your calling card to be to prove you belonged?
It's going to sound too high and mighty, but I wanted to be a journalist in that host role. I wanted to cover the news of the NHL, and no, not just the Toronto Maple Leafs. I wanted to bring those stories, whether they be good, bad, controversial, whether the NHL liked our treatment or not. I wanted us to be a news gathering and news producing show that perhaps hadn't been before. It was light in that regard, I guess you would say. And I hoped that the audience would appreciate a different approach, so that we could, as we were having discussions, so could the audience. Because I think the best part of following hockey in the NHL is to know what's happening and to have an opinion on what's good and what's bad, and to get together and talk about it. Well, I was getting together with millions of Canadian hockey fans every Saturday night, and I looked at it as a chat and hoped that there would be reaction. And there was. There was, what's that guy doing there? He's too young. I got some of that. Why did they have to bring up that drug suspension or whatever? Maybe that was too early for drug suspensions, but we don't want to hear that. I was also there to begin Coach's Corner with Don Cherry, and that was all in the same vein as far as I was concerned. I wanted issues to be discussed from a coach's standpoint, and sitting beside him was a television journalist who would have opinions to match Don's. Very often they didn't, and that was fine. That was the show. The show sizzled when we disagreed.
Well, it also had to be heady stuff for someone your age. Suddenly, you're in the orbit of folks like Gordie Howe all the time.
Yes, and Gordie was one of our first analysts. I think George Armstrong. Now, why can't I remember this? One or the other was first, and the other was second. I honestly, the first show, my memory is foggy. I compare it to your first time behind the wheel of a car, so-called learning to drive, and all you want to do is survive and get out of the car, and it's okay, and so are you after the first time. That was my first show, and I just, all I could do was hope that I got to the end okay, and what happened in between was going to have to be okay, but I knew it probably wouldn't be much better than that. I knew the second time, back to the audition theory, that the second time has to be better, and the second time was like driving a car for the second time. Hey, I can do this, but I needed that first try to prove that I could survive.
You mentioned the larger than life personalities who sat beside you in studio. The first one was Howie Meeker, who I'm guessing Sigmund Freud would have had a field day with, the way Howie was constantly talking about the size of players' sticks.
Boy, that was it was. I should answer it differently, but I have to go back to Gilbert Perrault because you introed it that way. Gilbert Perrault's last game, his retirement game, they brought his son out in a pregame ceremony, and the son was on skates and full gear with a stick, and Howie was beside me as we were describing it, and Howie went nuts. That kid should not be using a stick that big. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, Howie, this, he's not playing a game. Settle down. No, but I'll use this opportunity to tell you that here's how you measure the right stick for his, he became Howie Meeker when all we wanted to do was look at a ceremony for Gilles Perrault. Howie was one of a kind, obviously. He was, the Howie Meeker Hockey School was, boy, if you could graduate from it. And he watched the game during, so the first period getting ready for the intermission intensely. Like there wasn't anything that he missed. And it was like, how many of these exclamations are we going to be able to fit into our segment in the first intermission? Because you've found all these things interesting, and it was a kind of tough to, well, let's use this, and how he said I have to use that, and and then right back to the second period, and there was no talking to him at the time. Toward the end, what are we going to do, Howie? But for the first 15 minutes of the period, he was just locked onto the game. Others who do that now, I'm guessing are in easy chairs with a notepad. Not that the finished product is asking for anything, but how he took that role and his performance seriously, as seriously as if you were playing.
And did they call it a telestrator back then?
No, that probably was a term that I don't even know if we did have one at the beginning. I mean, video replay was brand new, almost. So stop it right there was, yeah. But I don't know that he could do anything else at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there was ever another name, so it must have been telestrator from the start.
Yeah. As far as Don Cherry, my long distance view from the States is that in Canada, he's viewed in one of three ways: a national treasure, a loud and entertaining, if self-absorbed, pundit, or a reactionary bigot. Which of those boxes did the guy sitting next to you check, in your opinion?
I think it asks a lot to be a national treasure, but if you have to be that to be considered for the media wing of the Hockey Hall of Fame, I don't think there's a more famous hockey announcer in my life, other than Foster Hewitt, than Don Cherry. And I think halls of fame need only measure how famous someone is. Don Cherry, for that reason, belongs in that media wing of the Hockey Hall of Fame, which the Hockey Hall of Fame insists that there's a media wing that's separate from the hall itself. But Don is in neither, and deserves to be in for number one on your list. I would think number two fits best. I mean, there were times when I wasn't wild about Don's view of I'll be honest, players from Quebec. He famously never called Patrick Waugh by his real name. It was Patty Roy. And we clashed about that. I said, Don, his name is Patrick Waugh. And the audience, especially in Quebec, expects his name to be pronounced properly by you, by me, by everybody on this show. The next time he mentioned him, he was Patty Roy. So that wasn't fun when we had those discussions. And Don, after a while, got to the point where he made his own rules. And I thought Hockey Night in Canada should never have anyone who makes rules other than Hockey Night rules. And obviously, at the end, for good reason or bad, Don left because of one of those so-called rules. But he had a long time to be able to test the waters, and he survived every time until the last. He was initially he was a great student, teach me about television sort of thing. And I said, well, I haven't been here that long, but here's what I want Coach's Corner to be. I want it, again, to cover the news of the week, trades, players who set records, players who are injured. And we talked every Friday night about what the segment should be on the next night. And Don would begin the conversation every time with, there was a terrific fight in Philly last night, and blood, and 5 guys thrown out, and the sixth one, carried on whatever. And I said, Don, A, it wasn't that bad. And B, it's not the biggest story of the week. Because in those days, there were a lot of fights.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was always wanting to skip what I thought was the biggest news and talk about what he liked, which most often was fights. And not that we could never talk about it, but he always wanted to talk about it. So that started us off on the wrong foot in terms of what the content of Coach's Corner should be. And we get into it one time about fighting in the NHL and does it belong or doesn't it? And he gave the usual defense that you have to fight to stand your ground and deliver a message, and you can't just you can't be hit and not respond. You can't see your teammate hit and you not respond. And then he told a story of a game where they were short on defense and Brad Park was going to have to play 40 minutes out of the 60 or whatever it was. And he told Brad Park, he told this story on the air. He said, I told Brad Park he could not fight in that game because we needed him to finish the game because we were so short on defense. And I said, Don, if you could tell Brad Park not to fight, you could tell anybody not to fight. Well, that conversation went in two different directions, and I don't think he appreciated the point I was making, and I probably was trying too hard to take an anti-fighting stance. But I've never quite understood the need to fight. I understand fights will happen, and very, very seldom do I think they're necessary.
I was going to leave this for later in our conversation, but since you brought up the topic of fighting in hockey, I want to read you a quote. And after I read it to you, I'll tell you who said it. How many players were left broken after spending their career standing up for the code? How many players were discarded by their team or forgotten by the league? How many lives fell apart? How many died? End quote. The writer of that quote was Dave Schultz of the Broad Street Bullies in his new book. If Dave Schultz can no longer defend fighting in this age of CTE knowledge, how can anyone else?
Right, but that viewpoint doesn't occur while players are wearing skates and making now millions of dollars. And I know football players who would say they love the game. What happens afterwards happens afterwards, and then you see them 10 or 20 years later, and they have trouble walking, and everything hurts, and
they have trouble remembering where they live.
Well, but I say, so, do you regret the career you chose and all of the hits you took? And no, they do it all again. I'm guessing Dave Schultz would too.
Yes, he said that.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, at one time, because I interviewed him about a month ago, and he said in the same conversation, I would do it all over again. And then a little while later, he'd say, but I hated hockey because of that.
Well, I mean, the Flyers won Stanley Cups in my mind because they were bullies. The game allowed it. And I remember being quoted as saying, if I managed or coached an NHL team, this was, back then, I would build a team the same way and try to win the same way. The league allows it. And if it takes you to a Stanley Cup, go ahead. And that's, Dave Schultz would do it again unless the NHL said, no, we've had enough of that, and be prevented from doing that. And maybe, there is less fighting now. I assume that players who are in the league now, 30 years later, are going to feel better than those guys did from the 70s.
Back to hockey night. I think the statute of limitations is run out. So can you discuss the regular after hours that wasn't broadcast by CBC that took place at local watering holes?
Can I discuss? Can you be more specific?
Well, I understand that some of those encounters, some of them done while still wearing the powder blue blazers, were as entertaining as what viewers saw.
Yeah, we probably weren't wise to go out and eat as well as drink and discuss the game and stay out too late and still wear that identification, because it obviously attracted people, mostly people that we didn't want to attract. But I wasn't about to be, bringing a change of clothes to work. It was, it wasn't healthy to be. I used to have a steak. I wouldn't eat before the game. After the game, went to one of the great steakhouses in Toronto history named George Biliardi's, named after the owner. George just celebrated his 91st birthday and can tell the stories of Frank Sinatra being in his restaurant. Joe Torre was a regular visitor, and after games, Leafs, Sittler, McDonald, Salming, a lot of them would wind up there. So that was the place to go. I've just given a plug to some place that doesn't exist, so I don't feel so bad about that. But George does. We just celebrated his 91st, and he owns horses, and in fact has one that he thinks might make it to the post in the King's Plate in 2026. Whether it has a chance to win or not, I don't know. But George is not in good health. I hope he lives to see that, and all of his friends will be there to witness it. And I don't know the name of the horse, but I will if it gets to that. So yeah, I'm not gonna give you any other spicy post game talk, but it was pretty regular. I don't know that I ever left the game and got in my car and drove home. You had to, what's the word? Relax, rewind, unwind. There we go. Well, I had to unwind. It wasn't always the best explanation when I got home the next morning. Oh, you were unwinding again? Yeah.
TSN's James Duthie tells a somewhat similar story about a summer party at Bob McKenzie's cottage when, and I'm quoting Duthie now, Hodge and Bob and Pierre Maguire get a little bit into the fruit coolers, and then he mentioned something about a monkey.
A monkey.
Well, that's what he said.
I'm going to blame that on Bob or Pierre. Probably Pierre. There was no live monkey. I would have been out of the room. No,
I think you were all in your Speedos, according to the way Duthie tells it.
It's getting worse as you add details.
How about if we just move on?
I think so.
Okay. When you left CBC for Global, is this true you did it between period skit with comedian Bob Robertson? and the people he impersonated were your former CBC intermission partners, Meeker and Cherry.
Bob could Bob did impressions as well as anybody I've known, and hilarious. I mean, his Don Cherry was you were on the floor, but he could do Canuck coaches, players, yes, broadcasters, and we did a Stanley Cup final, and the Oilers, I think, were the winners, and the producer John Shannon had Bob phone into the dressing room and pretend to be the prime minister, congratulating the team, and until the end they didn't know that it wasn't real. So he could do that. I mean, maybe Team USA should have. Bob isn't around anymore, but should have used Bob instead of Trump.
It couldn't have gone worse.
No,
But
it would have been funnier as opposed to cringeworthy. And and Kash Patel needn't have been admitted to the dressing room. I looked there to see if there was anybody else in that room that didn't belong. And I get, unless you think the FBI director belongs anywhere that he wishes to go, it looked like he was the only one that was granted admission by Team USA's general manager Bill Guerin, as the story goes. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about all of that, and wonder whether the NHL could have played some sort of role in preventing it by simply telling all NHL players at the Olympics that they had to return to their teams on the Tuesday, which was the day that the American players visited the White House. The women said it was not convenient for them. They had other things to do. And it seemed to me the men did too, but somehow needed either the NHL or the NHLPA or the IOC or whatever to say this is required. Thank you for providing NHL players for the Olympics, and yes, we understand that they have to get right back to their teams, no exceptions. Had that been in effect, I suppose Connor Hellebuck would still want to go and get the Medal of Freedom, but my view of it is countered by those who think the NHL loved it. Tell the NHL that they can have 7 or 8 of their players at the State of the Union and be recognized the way they were, and whether the NHL brass voted for Donald Trump or not, they would say that'll never happen, and if it can, why would we ever say no? Maybe they liked the fallout, but I don't think Austin Matthews liked it coming back to Toronto, or Brady Tkachuk liked it going back to Ottawa. I'm not sure about the Hellebuck and Kyle Connor reactions, and I'm forgetting somebody else. There were 5, I think. But anyway,
that's the camp of people who believe that any publicity is good publicity.
Yes, and I think the NHL, there's some publicity the NHL hasn't liked, but anything, as I say, that provides a nationwide, continental-wide television audience for an event like that, maybe nothing else mattered, but things mattered afterwards. And for those players who were Sanderson is the other one that I'm missing that returned to Ottawa, Jake Sanderson. Maybe they wish that they had returned to their NHL teams a day earlier.
In a kind of tangential point, concerning the Olympics. It seems there's a distinct difference between how people in the US and Canada react to a win or loss in international competition, like the two most recent gold medal hockey games. You know, here in the US, well, if we win, then we did it. And in Canada, it's a different type of reaction. If you agree, why is that?
Well, I think the difference is, as you say, where you are, we did it. Where I am, we must do it. I think is the difference. This is a tough time to be trying to tackle that subject because there were political overtones, obviously, especially on this side of the border. When you're referred to as the 51st state, you don't want to lose anything to the other 50, especially respect. And a lot of that has been lost at the White House, at least. So I think there were all of that packed into these games, and Canadians really were hurt by the losses, especially, well, the women put up a valiant struggle against the team that everybody thought was a whole lot better, and normally is, but on that day needed one overtime goal. And the men's game, Canada was not nearly lucky enough around the net, but had all those opportunities to score another goal, and that's always frustrating. No matter if the team you're cheering for should have won and didn't. Well, if it's an NHL game, they got a point. Don't get me started on that, but do get me started on that if you'd like. If you'd like me to suggest a change to the NHL, but no, in this case, just invited the obvious. Well, if you'd been the 51st state, you'd have two more gold medals. I go back to the Four Nations game that was won by Canada with some great goaltending by Craig Binnington. And at the time, the whole 51st state talk was rampant. And I happened to mention that the star goaltender for Team Canada at the Four Nations, Craig Binnington, wore the same number, 51, as would never be the number of states in the U.S. So provided an opportunity.
We're just getting started with Dave Hodge. On the next Hockey Time Machine, part 2 of our conversation, Dave tackles the so-called NHL loser point, offside challenges, why the best interview question has just one word, his experience in a music video, and much more. That's next time. For today, I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Thank you for joining us on Hockey Time Machine.